Hello and welcome once again to the tips and tricks video that I'm putting on here. This is on Fabrication CADmep 2017. This particular tips and trick video is going to feature a way that we can create multiple spool drawings from the isometric drawing. Okay, so what this means is we're going to take a look at the 3D model, we're going to define the spools, and then we're going to create spool sheets out of them. Okay. So let me set this up. I've got a file with a spool template, and I want to explain a few things about the spool template. And let me set that up, and we'll go ahead and move on with this. Alright, so let's continue here. What we're looking at is kind of a continuation of the same file here. I've brought that into another file that I have already set up. Now, this is typically how most of our customers will use this. What they will do is they will create a file that's used for their spool templates. Okay, so what that means is if I go look at the model space, you'll see that I've got some additional piping kind of thrown out here in space, but this is typically used in a way where you would bring your piping either into this file, or you would bring the spool template from this file into your piping model. Okay, so down below you're going to notice that I've got the model space, I also have a layout space, and what we're going to take a few minutes to look at here is the spool template. Okay, so this is how this works. In this spool template, I have a couple of views set up. I've got a plan view in wireframe, and I've got a 3D view in a conceptual. And what I'm looking at here specifically is I'm looking at the conceptual, and over here it's kind of hidden right now, but it's 2D wireframe. So as you can see, 2D wireframe, conceptual. I've got it with my company standard border, as you can see here. Let me zoom to extents, company standard border, and I would typically fill in this information. Now what you don't see, okay, it's hard to see, but there's a little point right here, and there's a little point right here. Now this is a particular block with some attributes in it, so is this one. Now what this does is this starts a report that I have in this spool template, and this is a bill of materials report. So this bill of materials is going to fill out based off of the spool that I've made, and then down below here in blue I've got another point set up and another endpoint set up. So what this does is it starts the report at this location, and it spans over to the width that I've defined, and then it will fill out things like the weld gaps and stuff like that. So these are two different reports that are running. Let me show you what those blocks actually are. It's just a point that's built into space. So this is a block reference, but it has attributes in it, right? So this is my report position, that's where it starts, and the report name in the attribute that I have here, okay, is bill of material contents. I'm going to show you that report in a few minutes. Now the next one I have down here, if I look at this one, this is also a block. You can see up at the top, this is a block. Here's the name of the block. This is also called report position. However, the report name is my weld connections. So what this does is this is a placeholder for where the reports will start. As you can see, those two grips. Now this one over here is super simple. This one, if we look at this in detail here, again we're looking at a block with the report, with the name of the block is report underscore width. Okay, that's very important. And the report name, we are going to end the width for the bill of material contents at that specific location. So my report will span, as I mentioned, from that point to that point. Now if I look at this fourth point over here, just in review, you'll see that this one also is a block. The name of the block is called report width, and it's going to end the weld connection report at that specific location. So this is some of the tricky information, and there's stuff on the help menu that will help guide you through this process. But once you set up your spool template, you would also want to have your reports set up. So we have to go take a look at the reports. Let's go back into our model space. So the reports, to get there, I think you just have to type add report, and it'll get us there. I'll select all the objects in the model here just by typing ALL and hitting enter. So these are all the reports at my disposal. Now the ones we're looking at specifically in this list are going to be bill of material contents, and I think it was called weld. Here it is, weld connections. So those are the two that are going to be placed on my spool sheets. Okay, so let's go take a look at that one. Bill of material contents. Let's go to next, and these are the lists. This is the list of parameters that come from the objects that we're selecting. Right? These are all the parameters. So what you do is you highlight the parameter. You highlight the parameter like equipment tag, and then you press the next button. So you slide this over, and what this does then is each one of these that you see listed here in this column, this becomes a row. So what this looks like then is you would have your report, and the first one here would be item number. So that would be item number, and I'm just going to abbreviate things here. Item number, and this would be the header here, right? So this is the header of the report, and then we have a cell that splits this off, right? And then the next one would be quantity, so this would be QTY, and then another cell, and then it would be source name, so this one would be name, and you get the idea here. So it's going to build a report based off of these items in that order, right? So I can click on next. I can bring all that information in here. You can sort things. You can group things. You can merge rows together, like quantity, for instance. I merge the quantities together. And what that means is if I have 8 elbows of the same size, it's going to merge all of those elbows on the same line item and give me a quantity, right? A quantity saying there's going to be 8 of these types of elbows. If I didn't do this merge rows together, if I didn't do that, it would list out each individual elbow in my list. In my list, it would have each individual elbow, and normally I wouldn't want that. So if you check that that little radio button, you'll make sure that you merge all of those instances of 8-inch elbows, and they would show up as one line item with a quantity of 8. There's some additional capabilities here. You can do calculations, any kind of algebraic calculation. So if you wanted to add 10% to your piping, just in general for some reason, I don't know why you would want to do that. If you wanted to subtract, an inch off of everything, I mean, you could do all that kind of thing within this environment here. And then ultimately you can filter things out. So it will only filter out, let's say I wanted my piping equipment. So it's pretty smart about how it does that. If I only wanted to do an elbow, I would tell it that the classification has to be of elbow type. If I wanted to do only my my hangers, I would classify it as hangers only. But that's what the filters is all about. I should probably make a more in-depth video on table creation and report creation. But once you've got that satisfied, you're then using those reports to make the spool sheet. So let's walk through the spooling process. So what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and create my spool definitions. Now in the toolbar here, you're going to see define, create spools. You'll see batch create spools, set spool color and reset the color, and then of course the spool dim, the spool dim tool, add spool dimension. We've talked about that one in an earlier video. The next one we're going to look at is define and create spools. So what this means is we're going to use these color ranges, as you can see here. Now, I don't really want to use white. I don't want to use the gray. I don't want to use the dark gray or the light gray. I just want to cycle from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors, and that's it. So I'll just remove 7, 8, 9 here. Okay, so what this means is as I make a new spool, it's going to take on a new color. And I'm hitting the bump color so I can see how many colors am I going to have. And you'll see that they repeat once it gets to the magenta, it goes back to red. Red is number 1. So the idea here is you will define the spools, okay? And I've got, let's say I'm working on a Nike project. I live in Hillsboro, Oregon, and it's a gorgeous blue sky day today. But the neighboring town in Beaverton, that's the Nike World Headquarters. So if I was working on their project, I would say Nike Spool -101. And you can name it anything you want. I like to observe best practices of having no spaces. And if I'm on the first floor, I like to name it 101. So let's go ahead and start with that. The template is already built into my file here, so I'll hit on OK. So this will be my first spool, and oh, you know what? Let me cancel out of this. I didn't want to do a spool right now. So it made a new file, and I don't like doing new files like that. So yeah, let's take these items here and take them off of a spool here. So I go to wrong button here. Multi-object properties, and just remove the spool information from it. So that way it's not spooled. Alright, let's go ahead and start the spooling process one more time. And what's going on is I have this button checked here that says create spool on OK. And I don't want to do that. I just want to start the process of creating the spools from scratch. So I'll place this on a spool. I'll place this next run over here on its own spool. Now, I'll go ahead and place all of this on a spool. And this one will be on its own spool. And then I'll place all of this on its own spool. So as you can see, both in 2D and in 3D, we're defining the spools as they're supposed to be added on here, right? So let's go ahead and add all this whole kick right here onto its own spool, and then all of this stuff will be on its own spool. So this is typically the process that you'll go through when you're spooling out your sheets here. You just make decisions based off of what spool you need and when you need it, right? So I'm not going to do the whole drawing, but that's good enough. And what I want to do next is I want to create my batch spool. Now what this does is it takes all of the spools that I've already created, and it'll give me that capability here. Alright, so now that we're looking at the define and create spools, let's take a look at this. Right now the spool name, it's grayed out. Why is that? Because I've got all of these selected. So if you click on this button called select all, then you can go in and select individual ones, right? So I'll go ahead and select all of them because I do want to create a spool sheet. Let's go through this process here. So it's asking for the path. And if you have a file where you have a spool template already created, so here's the spool template, and you just want to tell it use that spool template, this is where you would browse to that file, right? So here's the template. You can tell it specifically where that template is. The path is where you would save all your spool sheets. You can give it the job information. I'm not going to mess with that. And set view to, well, I suppose I'll put it to plan. And then it's got all of this different information here. You know, what type of a report you want to put up, and so this is where that comes in, right? However, my spool template already has the report built into it, right? So I'm not going to use that. And now update title with report name, execute script file, what we want to do for the tags is, yes, I do want to display them, but no, I don't want it to prompt me for position, right? And I want to create all of these in a layout, right? So it's going to take the spool template and automatically apply that to a new layout tab for each one of these spools. So let's see how this works. Click on OK. So what you're seeing here is it's ripping through each one of those and creating a plan view and a 3D view based off of all that information, right? Oh, and I forgot to do the report name, but typically that would show up within each one of these. So let's take a look at all of that, and let's get back to our model space here. You can see the bubbles have been created for us. Let's go through the batch process one more time. Report bill materials. I think that's all we need to do. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, wrong one. Bill material contents, okay. Oh, before I do that, I probably want to delete all of these spool sheets. I don't want them to be recreated, and it'll prompt me if I want to recreate it. It already exists. Do you want to recreate it? And I don't want to be prompted there. So I think I've got them all here. Let's do that one more time. Bill of material contents and hit OK. All right, there we go. So I had that one thing set so that it was off, but at this point, I mean, we can go through and start to move our items here, and you'll see that if I select that particular tag, it highlights the object that it's related to. So then I can use that particular arrow there and just kind of grab it and point towards that object. So this one looks like it's associated to the weld, and I'll just point right at the weld here. And let's grab this guy, and you can see that's associated to the elbow, and I'll just grab the grip there for the arrow and point it at the elbow. So you'll see how that process gets managed throughout this whole venture here. Oh, I must have grabbed the weld itself. Is that it? No. I think I grabbed, there we go. So I'll move that over here and stretch this guy over a little further. There we go. And let's go ahead and drop that in here. Great. So as you can see, we've got the process of how you go about annotating everything. It automatically places the bubbles. You'll have some window management to do in the handle there, but in the end, what it does is it creates your spool sheets. Imagine if you had a full floor of all kinds of piping out there. We got our bill of materials in there very easily. Additionally, we've got our weld connections, and I think that when you combine the spool template with the three-dimensional piping that you've already got, you can go ahead and create a lot of documentation very quickly based off of the modeling. So what does this do for you? I mean, why is this important? The reason this is important is because it'll let the detailer concentrate on detailing, make sure that everything can fit, make sure that there's no collisions, make sure that it can be built and transported out to the site. If you're doing prefab, this is extremely crucial, right? Then the documentation that happens on the backside, it's just kind of an automatic process of how you like it. Now, a few things to consider. You're going to want to create your bill of material contents and your weld connections. You're going to want to dial that in. Make sure that it's the way that you guys like to document things, and extract those properties from these particular models that you're getting, right? So in that aspect, you know, there's a lot to be configured, but once you've got it configured, this process is pretty simple to go about doing, right? So there's a lot to be liked there. Ultimately, you'll hit a stride and a way that you like to continue making your files. Once that happens, it's pretty much cruise control. You'll concentrate more on creating the content and creating your designs, as opposed to documenting and worrying about the small CAD minutia that really has nothing to do with design. Things like layer management, stuff like that. That doesn't have much to do with design, but this does, right? Is making sure that you get your design fully documented. That's all about the design work. So in the end, I think that what we wound up with here is a very effective way to communicate how all of this is happening within that whole process.